The storm rolled in like a curtain of shadows, swallowing the city skyline in thick, rumbling clouds. Raindrops pelted the streets, wind howled through the iron gates of Ravenwood Estate, and most of the world seemed to be seeking shelter. But one figure moved slowly, almost hesitantly, toward the grand black gates that marked the entrance to the estate. She was barely more than a silhouette beneath the downpour, young, thin, and trembling from the cold. Her oversized coat was soaked through, and her shoes made squishing sounds with every step on the marble-paved driveway. Strands of wet hair clung to her pale cheeks, and her breath fogged in the air each time she exhaled. Inside, Maxwell Hayes stood with a cup of black coffee in his hand, watching the storm from the third-floor balcony of his study. The CEO of Hayes Technologies, Maxwell had everything the world could offer: money, status, influence. But what he lacked, what no amount of wealth had been able to buy, was peace. The silence inside his mansion was loud, deafening, even. And tonight, he felt it more than ever. He was about to turn away when he noticed movement on the security feed mounted in the corner of his screen. Someone at the gate. Unusual. His estate was far removed from the city, nestled between hills and old trees. No one ever came here unannounced. He leaned forward, squinting at the screen as his butler entered the study. "Sir, there's someone outside the main gate," the butler said softly. A girl, Maxwell repeated, slightly surprised. "This late? She's drenched. Looks like she's been walking for a while." She asked to speak to someone." Maxwell placed his cup on the table and walked briskly toward the monitors. With a press of a button, the camera feed zoomed in closer. The girl raised her eyes to the camera, and in the clearest, most broken voice, she said, "Can I clean your mansion for a plate of food?" Maxwell's breath caught. The girl looked barely 20. Her cheeks were hollow, her lips cracked. Her hands were clenched in front of her as if holding herself together. Something about her voice struck him, vulnerable, but still dignified. Desperate, yet brave. "Shall I call security?" the butler asked. Maxwell didn't answer immediately. He was still staring at the screen, his gaze fixed on her face. His mind was spinning. There was something about her. Something familiar. Her eyes. Those eyes. They pulled at a memory buried under years of success in suits and skyscrapers. A cold winter night, long before his fortune. When he was young, hungry, and homeless. Sleeping in the backseat of his beat-up car behind an old soup kitchen on Eastvale Street. And then, her. He remembered her. A volunteer with a soft smile who handed him a warm sandwich and said, "No one's invisible." Not tonight. She had looked just like this girl. Could it be? Maxwell stepped back from the monitor, shaken. "Sir," the butler repeated. He looked at him sharply. "Open the gates. Bring her in. Now." The butler hesitated only a second before nodding and heading down the hall. Maxwell stood frozen, hands trembling slightly. He had faced boardrooms full of cutthroat investors, made billion-dollar decisions, and commanded armies of employees. But right now, his heart thudded in his chest like he was 20 years old again, scared, lost, and clinging to a moment of kindness. Minutes passed. He waited by the tall entrance doors of his mansion, unsure what he would say, what he would feel when she arrived. The heavy doors opened slowly. There she was, up close. She looked even more fragile. Water dripped from her coat. Her face was pale, her lips trembling. But she stood straight, as though holding on to whatever dignity she had left. "I'm sorry to bother you," she began in a voice so soft it barely made it past her lips. "I didn't know where else to go. I'll clean anything, scrub floors, do laundry. She hesitated, swallowing, "I just need a plate of food." "Please." Maxwell stared at her, stunned. She blinked, looking confused by his silence. Do you know me?" she asked, unsure. Maxwell whispered, more to himself than to her. "It's really you." And in that moment, everything began to change. The silence stretched between them as the rain continued its gentle drumming against the windows of the grand hallway. The girl stood near the threshold, hesitant, dripping, and slightly trembling, not just from the cold, but from the way the man before her stared at her. Not with disgust or suspicion, but with stunned familiarity, as if she'd stepped out of his memories. I don't understand," she said softly, her fingers tightening around the worn strap of her satchel. "Do I know you?" Maxwell Hayes took a cautious step closer, his voice low, barely more than a whisper. "Your name is Elena, right?" She froze. "How do you know that?" she asked, her eyes narrowing slightly. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he studied her face, as if confirming what his heart had already decided. The angles of her cheeks, the curve of her nose, the soft kindness in her eyes, even under exhaustion and hardship, she hadn't changed much. I wasn't always this, Maxwell said, gesturing around at the chandelier-lit entryway, the marble floors, the world of wealth that surrounded them. A long time ago, I was just a kid sleeping in his car behind a soup kitchen in Eastvale. Alina's expression shifted. She blinked. I used to volunteer there, she murmured. Years ago. Before everything changed. He smiled softly. You gave me a sandwich. A cup of coffee. And you said, no one's invisible. Not tonight, she gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God, the boy in the red hoodie. You had a sketchbook. His eyes lit up. You remember. I remember everyone, she whispered. But you, I always wondered what happened to you. Maxwell's voice cracked. You saved me that night, Elena. I was days away from giving up. I had nothing, no job, no family, no future. But something about how you looked at me, how you spoke to me, made me feel like I mattered. Elena's gaze dropped to the floor, her chest rising and falling with emotion she hadn't expected. But I never imagined you'd become this, she said, glancing around again at the towering staircase, the gilded frames, the quiet luxury that defined his life. Maxwell gave a small, humble nod. I got lucky, got a job as an intern, worked my way up, made a few smart investments. But I never forgot that night. I told myself that if I ever made it out, I'd do something meaningful with what I had. That I'd repay the kindness someone once gave me. Her eyes filled with tears. I didn't come here for charity, she said quickly, trying to reclaim some ground. I didn't even know this was your house. I was just hungry. I haven't eaten in 2 days. I lost my job last month. Couldn't make rent. I tried shelters, but they're full. I just wanted to clean in exchange for a warm meal. Maxwell shook his head gently. You don't have to explain. You've done more for me than you realize. And I would never turn away the person who helped me find my way. But it was just one meal, she whispered. So is this, he replied softly. But it could change your life the way yours changed mine. For a moment, she didn't speak. Her lips trembled, and her shoulders began to shake, not from cold, but from the release of weeks of pain, fear, and exhaustion. And then, quietly, the tears began to fall. Maxwell stepped forward and wrapped a soft wool blanket around her shoulders. You're safe now, he said. Come inside, eat something, rest, and tomorrow, we'll talk about what comes next. She looked up at him with wide, watery eyes. Why are you doing this? He gave her a smile so genuine, it softened the hard lines of his face. Because when I was at my lowest, you gave me hope. You didn't know who I was. You didn't need to. You were just kind. And now, I want to be that for you. For the first time in weeks, Elena exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. And with that, she stepped fully into the mansion, not as a beggar, not as a stranger, but as someone who had finally been seen again. In a world where success often builds walls between the powerful and the forgotten, one stormy night tore those walls down. Elena had knocked on a gate with nothing but hunger in her stomach and hope in her heart. She expected rejection. She offered labor for a meal. What she received was something far more profound: recognition, dignity, and redemption. For Maxwell Hayes, the billionaire CEO, it wasn't just a case of charity. It was fate bringing him full circle. The girl who had once handed him a warm sandwich and the will to survive now stood on his doorstep, battered by life but not broken. And for the first time in years, he realized that wealth wasn't about the size of his estate, it was about what he could do with it. He gave her more than food and shelter. He offered her a new beginning, one rooted in gratitude, respect, and mutual history. In return, Elena reminded him of something he'd forgotten, that humanity is not measured by power, but by kindness shared in the quietest moments. What began with a simple question, "Can I clean your mansion for a plate of food?" ended with two lives reconnected by compassion. And in that unexpected reunion, both of them rediscovered something priceless: hope.